what is helpful for you from a tools perspective that helps you do your job better? Or can you think of any examples of that when you were sort of like, I need this, and Dennis and his colleagues sort of said, you got it, bud, and delivered?
Oh, damn. I wish I had that button. Just click and everything is there. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. Maybe one day Sam Altman will give us something with ChatGPT and everything will be straight away in the engine, but we're not there yet. Regarding
hopefully not, right?
Yeah, I also don't want to lose my job.
Say from my perspective.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the Game Developer Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Editor Bryant Francis. I've been hungrily waiting for Bloober Team's Cronos: The New Dawn ever since I saw it at GDC this year. This sci-fi survival horror game is the exact kind of title that catches my attention. The player character is a time-traveling weirdo in a faceless helmet talking in a spooky voice. The art direction is fantastic and comes from a very specific point of view. And maybe most importantly, you can find all kinds of different cats in the game and give them a little pat on the head. But at GDC, something else drew me into this game: the combat. Cronos' combat design feels like it could be an inspiring step forward for survival horror game design, just like Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space were. In this game, enemies don't just hunt the player, they search for bodies of other downed enemies to absorb them and upgrade themselves into a bigger threat. That's a subtle feature with huge ripple effects. Zombie-like enemies evolving to tougher forms isn't really that new. I'm thinking of some of the Resident Evil 4 enemies here, so that's like way over a decade old. But tasking players with keeping track of where the downed bodies are so they can prevent that evolution is like, has a mind-blowing downstream effect on game development, doesn't it? Combine that with some other unique design decisions, like denying players a dodge feature, you've got an experience that feels like it could be a true leap forward for the genre. Today, I'm excited to have Bloober Team combat designers Dennis Pauly and Shamil Yanbukhtin on the podcast to dig through the guts of Cronos: The New Dawn's combat. Don't worry, it's not a super gory discussion. Dennis and Shamil, welcome to the Game Developer Podcast. It's great to have you here today.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
It's an honor to be here.
Starting with Shamil, just for our audience, could you actually tell us about your job titles real quick and tell us sort of like what your role in shaping Cronos: The New Dawn's combat system was?
Okay, so on Cronos: The New Dawn, I'm a lead combat designer, and my primary task is overseeing everything that is related to the core combat loop of the player. What the hell is he doing? Why? He needs to do specific things and other things he cannot do it, and what kind of enemies are basically must stop him from completing the task. That is basically my entire work in a general. But when it comes to, let's say, a mid-low level ground, it is more about setting up the different pieces of systems into the game, working in a close collaboration with programmers like Dennis, different designers in my team, animators, artists, VFX artists, SFX artists, and of course working with the level design team.
And Dennis, what would your role be?
So yeah, I'm working as an AI programmer on Cronos. So my job is basically to work closely together with the combat team and making those things work on like under the hood, make sure that the combat team can create their encounters on the game as the creativity flows.
Absolutely. So if I were to describe what makes Cronos combat unique, it doesn't sound necessarily amazingly complex on the player side, which is, when you are fighting enemies in the survival horror environment, so the player's a little clunky, like the ammo is limited, like in this game, shots may take a while to charge up, that creates tension. But the big thing is that enemies will seek out the bodies of other downed enemies and use those bodies to evolve. So the player sort of also has to keep track of, okay, where did I leave that corpse? Why is that guy running in that direction? That's both like, all right, like that's a unique twist, but I, as a person who knows too much about video games and game design and game development, like my head exploded when I saw that. But I don't know if someone else would automatically get why this is like kind of a crazy complex thing. Like, so guys, like why why is this crazy and complex? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's perfectly normal. Maybe it's easy to make and it's not complex at all.
Well, on the design side, it's kind of easy, like on paper. One enemy, it's another one, it became stronger, like easy peasy. But when it comes to systems, yeah, it was quite a challenge, especially when it comes to composition of enemies and bringing up different varieties. Yeah, that was a big challenge. But I believe on the technical side, Dennis would actually give more insight how it was. Pain and one soft spot.
I mean, firstly, it was a great challenge to be working on. It was super complex, especially like the main thing that's different from other games, where in other games you can just get rid of corpses at some point. We had to actually make sure that we still have them, and being aware of what type of enemy that was and what information they have, and making sure that this still persists throughout the gameplay, the course of the game. And of course, I'm not sure how much I can go into detail about different appearances of our enemies and keeping them active. And when one enemy absorbs another one, then we get the proper new version of that. That was definitely a challenge.
Yeah. Besides that, one of the challenge was to keep up a proper pacing of it, to not overwhelm the player with that factor. Because I remember one of our playtests, there were like tremendous amount of merging was like happening all the time. It was basically impossible to stand out and to fight all of them. It was straight away way too difficult. So that was also a big challenge to us, to find the proper pacing, to keep it still fresh, threatening, but at the same time not be super easy to stop it or something. So that was also one of the tricky things.
Yeah. Dennis, you mentioned something that I think is but one of those things that, when players don't notice it, that means everything's working, but behind the scenes, it's a process to get right, is, in most video games, like the presence of corpses on the battlefield and games of shooting or slaying any kind, those bodies need to, either fade out. Sometimes they fade out visibly, because there's like some supernatural effect, and like signifying that they're gone is helpful to the player, or they kind of fade out quietly. In a conventional game, like, what's the reason you need those bodies to be like fading out and not staying on screen?
It's mostly the performance reason, I think. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably also the only reason is to keep the performance up. Because especially when you have a complex enemy running, you, of course, on death you stop like all the logic that you don't need, but you might still have the skeleton, the rectals, even if you have an enemy that has physics on death, like all these things that you can of course disable, but still it needs to be computed at like all the time. And you don't, if everything basically in game development, if you don't need it, then just get rid of it. And I think that's one of the things that, and usually as a gamer, everybody is basically okay with that. This is a feature in games, that corpses just disappear after some time. In best case, when you don't look at them, so you don't see them fade out. But yeah, sure. In our case, that was not possible at all.
Yeah, and this is sort of like, this might be something that like is more persistent in like a stealth game like Assassin's Creed, right? Where like Thief, where a body needs to be spotted by another guard. But here, like you mentioned, there's a couple other elements. Are you able to share anything about like what the main thing to address when it comes to performances? Like when a body needs to have that many traits, like what are sort of the things that the engineering team needs to focus on to make sure it's not dragging on performance, even though it's so clutch to gameplay?
That's a good question. I would say the main thing is to make something that's dynamic to something that is static in the world, so we don't have to process it every time when the world is rendered. So we place it once, and then we're good with all the computation, and there are multiple things that you can do. For example, when you have a complex dismemberment system, then you have to also, and that goes to Shamil, I guess, about design decisions. Do you still want to have that as a possibility on a corpse? Because that again means that you have to have a more complex corpse than just a static mesh, for example. It's a bit difficult for me to answer that straight away. I must say, like all those there's multiple things coming together.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. Hey, game design's difficult, and sometimes the questions are just difficult. Shamil, on your side, like, I'm familiar, when designers of all stripes are working around, the constraints of a game, the technical constraints. Dennis sort of just mentioned like the limb cutting system. So what were sort of your broad design tools to make sure you were Dennis was doing everything to make sure your job was possible, but you were still sitting there going like, all right, we've got these barriers that we need to adhere to. Like, what were some of your thoughts about how to keep inside those barriers while still making something like exciting and visceral for the player?
Ooh, that's a good question. I believe all designers in their work, they always have some barriers and limitations, and the best design happens when the limitations are like almost everywhere, but you need to work around with it and take that as a challenge. For combat team, I believe the biggest challenge was probably the level design layout, because again, due to the merge system, we had to work a lot on the encounters to make sure that each encounter able to produce a situation when the merge is happening. And when the merge is happening, it accelerates the difficulty. What are the player outcomes, possibilities? Plus, on top of that, as Dennis was mentioning, the performance issues, right? Like the game has some backtracking elements, and the player can leave the corpses behind his adventure. And what's gonna happen there? If player keeps the corpse and the live creature, will it eat the guy? What will happen with the player? Will he actually figure out that, okay, the character became stronger because I left the dead body here, or it will feel like a frustration, like out of a sudden the new monster appeared. Why? Is it a bug or not a bug? So those things had to be counted a lot, and I believe during the production that was, let's say, the most frequent topic to discuss between teams, what we need to do here and there, and that was probably the most iterative element of the entire production.
Yeah. The level design, I was checking out some gameplay footage before we started today, and I sort of noticed, I feel like in this system, like one of the interesting challenges for shaping spaces in Cronos is the player needs like sort of surprisingly long like views in a lot of places, or at least they need to be able to position themselves in that place. Like one of the combat sequences I watched, there was the player was shooting an enemy through effectively a hole in a wall. Like the wall was two fleshy things and there was kind of like that space between them. And the player was sort of shooting them through that, but it was clear that like, as the player rotated around the room and those sort of flesh pillars were there. I love flesh pillars. You guys make such interesting games. Like it was pretty clear that like there was always an opportunity to see if someone back there was sort of like in the background, was instead of they were coming forward to the player, they were sort of skittering to the side. Do you feel like that's one of the consistent elements of the level design, was like that kind of where things shook out in terms of how the levels flowed, or was there some other unexpected principle that made them better in terms of like geometry and layout?
Well, in terms of that was actually really the principle of the level layout and the encounter layout. So in each encounter, we've been trying first do, as we call it, like foreshadowing the encounter, just to tell a player a small, let's say, a sneak peek that something is gonna to happen, so you can be prepared, because the enemies in the game are brutal and combat is hard. So after a lot of playtests, we came up to the decision that, okay, dropping straight away player into the pit all the time, it's frustrating and basically drains all, let's say, inner power and forces, and players just became tired super fast. So the fatigue was real. And with that approach, we decided, okay, we need to foreshadow characters. We need foreshadow encounters, just like with you mentioning that flash wall, was showcasing that the enemy is over there. That was one of the principles. And on top of that, of course, that the entire game plays in a semi-real environment, let's call it this way. Of course, it's not full realistic. We didn't go into the full realism approach. However, it is a believable environment. It is based on a history. It is based on actual places here in Krakow. And it was also important element to that. So we couldn't, create an unrealistic hospital or unrealistic apartment in Nova Huta. So it was also one of the constraints.
Yeah, like there's sort of the classic, the big room with chest high walls for like cover shooters.
Yes.
And those will like take place in open environments. Like they're like, I'm thinking of Gears of War. I played Gears 5 recently, and obviously, that game takes place in an urban environment. It tries to let the players feel like they're in a natural setting, but there's a bit more leeway there to open up the space, into something not quite realistic. But if you guys are, something I talked with your team with back at GDC was, the tight ties to Krakow, this very the environment's coming out of a specific point in Polish history.
Yes.
I can imagine those are some major constraints.
Yeah, there were a lot of them, to be honest.
Yeah. Speaking of my time at GDC, Dennis, after I talked to saw Cronos at GDC, talked to some of your fellow team members who were in San Francisco, I happened to have a meeting later that day with Havoc, the physics and AI navigation tool makers, and I don't believe you guys are using them, but what I was talking about with them was like kind of one of the next interesting fields of game design is enemy AI navigation and spatial manipulation. Not in a, I need to go kick generative AI out of this podcast because I've talked about it on every other episode so far. So not in that sense, but like, do you feel like, as a programmer, like there are more interesting possibilities opening up, in that space, and like more interesting opportunities for enemy NPCs to be doing something complex, like interacting with bodies and not just sort of like coming at the player in different patterns?
Certainly, I think especially for cases that you mentioned, like path following and navigation, I think that there are good examples how you can, where we might be seeing some nice evolutions in the near future.
For our audience, like I think the most interesting takeaway I had from that conversation was we talked about like having larger enemies interact in the same space as smaller enemies, and the ability for those to sort of more naturally sit in the same environment instead of sort of having isolated environments for each of them. Shamil, kind of dodging back to your side of the discipline, something you guys don't do in this game is have a dodge function. The player instead, drops a flamethrower. Drops a flamethrower, but like does a little like flame stomp.
Yeah. To
push enemies away.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing because every combat game I play right now lets me do a duck and roll.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that decision and how it's flowed out in terms of work?
I know. And a lot of people are hating us for that. Ooh. And I believe that a lot of people are going to crush my LinkedIn profile or find me on Instagram and start telling bad words, how bad designer I am and I should be fired. Well, basically, of course, during the production, there were questions regarding dodge. And I won't lie to you, we actually had a dodge at a specific moment of the development. But after the lot of playtests and a lot of iterations, we came up to the conclusion that during the combat, players weren't actually interested in the environment. Player weren't interested in a tactical decision-making. Player, on every situation, what would happen to them, they would instantly, with no brain challenge, was started pressing dodge button. And I'm not lying to you, there was even a moment on one of the play sessions where the character just appeared on a long range in front of him, and he just pressed the dodge button. Nothing had happened, but already an instant dodge button. So it was such a no-brainer decision for the players, and it was completely ruining the intention from our perspective to build actually the survival horror game where you need to survive and you need to actually think about what the hell are you doing and how you're gonna overcome the difficulty. We decided that having a dodge, it's not for us. It more leans towards, power fantasy game, like, I don't know, like Doom games or something like this.
Or Gears. We talked about Gears 5
yeah,
and
Gears
dodging.
5, yes, yeah, that's a good one. Or, for example, Returnal, who has as well the dodge mechanic. And for us, we decided it is not good. It kind of breaks the immersion heavily. Plus, besides that, we had always a reference as a gameplay in terms of combat as a Resident Evil 2 remake and Resident Evil 4 remake, not Resident Evil 3 with the side small dodge thingy that protagonist had. So once we removed that, it instantly fleshed out the combat difficulty spike, and the game instantly became interesting. Players started, okay, it's difficult. It's hard, it's ruthless, you need to be super cautious to see characters' animation, but it was, let's call it, worth to do that, because instantly players were feel the reward for being smart and actually outmaking the AI.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's kind of a resource management element too. There is a resource management. Hey guys, did you know words are hard to say out loud? There's a resource management element to that too, because there's kind of a gas resource that you also use for other things, right? Like that's also, so it's not just, I don't know, dodges can cost stamina or have a cooldown, but it's just straight up like, hey, you're tapping into the same ecosystem that powers your weapons.
Yes, exactly. So regarding the resource management, it also was, and still, one of our key design pillars into the surviving horror element. To make the decision making, the thought process for the player. So the player, each single one of them, decides what is best fit for me right now to do. Like, I'm not good at, for example, shooting, so probably I'm gonna create extra health packs or extra flamethrowers to save my ass. Or vice versa, I'm really super good at shooting, so I don't need extra health ammo or health packs or fire armor. I can do all the stuff with just shooting into the head and stopping enemies so they will not even able to get me. So this is the thought process that we wanted to build for the player, as well as the upgrading mechanics that player has to upgrade its own weapons, its suit, what is best fits to him. And with that element, with limited space in the inventory, we made in my opinion, again, I'm biased, don't get me wrong, we made a very cool experience moments where player actually frightened with the bad decision he or she made before, that, oh my god, there is a big ass guy here and I wasted all my resources into a health packs and I actually needed here a shotgun, or this is a super difficult encounter with a lot of enemies. That would be cool to have a flamethrower with me. So yeah, that's cool. That's cool experience.
Yeah. Let's go a little high level a bit. I've been doing that thing where I just, go in so deep because I want to know your deepest, darkest secrets. Cronos the New Dawn, we've sort of touched on one high level point of sort of like the big themes and design direction of this game, which is, it's partially set in Krakow in a very specific point in time, but it's also only set in that period of time because your character's doing some time travel, some wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey time travel nonsense. The whole story, there's sort of a story about like preserving history. There's a story about like, learning the lessons of the apocalyptic event that destroyed Krakow here, and let this disease that creates these horrible monsters out in the world. What inspired each of you guys about that? Because when we're talking about the field below, down below, like there's this everyday like kind of problem solving you have to get into that can get abstract, but at the same time, the folks up top are doing a hopefully good job of keeping everyone on vision, like pushing towards this big goal for the project. So I guess like what inspired each of you about the setting, about the themes, and like how do you think it helped your work?
It was
You want to
special.
go first?
Go maybe.
First.
Because it's something new. This setting for me. I don't live in Poland, so I don't have that connection. But still, as someone who grew up in northwestern Germany, there are some connections there. Some things look a bit like a bit the same. So it's nice to see something like that as a game environment, and playing in a environment that you have not really seen before much in many other games. Mm-hmm. So at least without that, even without that straight connection to this place Nova Huta where the game plays, it's still interesting to watch.
Yeah, for me personally, originally I'm from Russia, from St. Petersburg, and Krakow city, it's a very nice place to live in, and I see here a lot of, let's say, similarity with my hometown, St. Petersburg, and as well with specifically Nova Huta, where the prime story has happened. There is a lot of, Soviet Union legacy, which I also had in my past, and while been working here in Bloober Team, turned out that me as a Russian, I have a lot of, let's say, connection to guys from Poland, and we had a lot of similar stories from our childhood, what we were watching, what kind of, gums we were eating outside of school, like what were our first games on PCs or something like this. So there were a big culture, let's say, similarity between us. So for the Cronos New Dawn, for me again personally, seeing all those images, visuals, like even fonts on the buildings or on papers, it's like a small time jump into the childhood, I would call it this way. So, of course, it was a big pleasure to work on the project in that regard.
Yeah. And it's a time jump in more than one way, because like we said, there's some time travel stuff going on. Which then brings me to the next important question. When you guys were playtesting the game, how many cats did you pet? Did you guys keep track?
All of them.
Because the cat petting is very important.
Yeah.
Yes, I also pet all of them, but I don't remember the actual count of them. But there's a lot of them.
Oh, disappointing, Shamil. Though that said, on your side, Shamil, when I was talking to your colleagues back at GDC, like we were sort of talking about how like the petting the cats, which are also sort of a collectible feature, they sort of come back and hang out in your HQ.
Yes.
We were talking about how like this is kind of an interesting like quiet bit of combat design, of level design, of scenario design, because these are tension breakers, right? Like sort of what we were talking about back then. So there's, in the overall pace of a level, having a moment where all the player can hear is that cat's meowing and then go looking for it plays a role in your end of the work, right?
Yes. The cat system basically became sort of like a reward system for the exploration. So on my side, it was more of a case to make sure that there are no enemies and player unable to fight there, because the major like problem, like a brain pain, was led on the level design side and environment team to make a proper placement for cats.
There was no, wait, are you implying there was a time when someone was playtesting and someone went, hey, you dropped some enemies in my cat location?
Yes, there was even a situation where people were able to shoot into cats.
No.
Yes,
dark.
That dark, yes.
All right, well, okay, we need to arrest whoever was doing the shooting for war crimes. Anyway, no. The cats are perfect, even though, said the guy who has to kick his cat out of the office whenever he's recording this podcast.
Yes.
For both of you, again, something I've heard from game developers is that quietly, and this isn't something I sort of see talked about in spaces with gamers that gamers freak run a lot per se. Combat design, even though it is so fundamental to so many video games, is actually very challenging to implement, is something I've heard, right? And they're obviously sort of like more detailed. There are more detailed reasons for that. Different games might have different reasons. It's combat. If we're describing combat broadly, like maybe turn-based combat and turn-based tactical combat are easier. But when it comes to like a live environment where the player is moving and shooting, I'm sort of told this is more difficult than those on the outside of game development. I understand. Do each of you agree with that? Is there anything from your own experience that sort of proves that's true?
Then you go first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I didn't have that much to do with the design and balancing things, so that's more one for Shamil. What I can say is that we definitely had to work hard on delivering the tools that allow designers to fine-tune the combat, because it was so difficult to get a challenging gameplay that doesn't feel unfair, and it was important for us from the AI team to make sure that designers can actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from the design perspective, I'm in game industry for 14 years, and the biggest part of it, I'm a game designer, and specifically making combat elements for video games. So I never touched anything related to narration or to level design. Straight away combat. So for me, combat is sort of like a natural thingy. So I'm very biased here, and everybody who gonna hear my answer, please have it in mind. The biased guy is telling some stupid stuff. But on the scope level, it's always difficult, because when it comes to making the combat, it's not just only the story about, okay, I have a pistol and there is enemies, let's make it killable in 3 shots. It's not fun, because in the end, the main reason here, the main elephant in the room is the player's fantasy. Who the hell is player, and what he or she capable or not capable to do so, and why on God's green earth player does one thing and unable to do another thing. And these are the answers that are very, very important. And when it comes to creating the combat, now you need to multiply it on the feedback element, that the enemies must respond to your actions. Your weapon must provide proper feedback of shooting, the sound effects, visual effects. On top of that, there are going to be bizarre amount of crazy edge cases where your unthinkable elements start getting into reality, and this is like your new level of nightmare appears, where you are drawn into the bugs and you see that they're destroying the experience that you wanted to build. But this is like this is the truth. You need to find a solution to not let those bugs to be happen, but the experience to be saved. And this is also like a new level of problems. On top of that, when it comes to the combat experience, it is extremely crucial for everybody within the team to understand what elements are important for us, what elements are less important for us. What is for us it's super crucial in terms of readability and specifically feedback, because the feedback for the player is the main hero. Come on, this is the person who this is the person who pays money to get excitement, experience, the joy, the fun, the pleasure, and maybe even drama to cry after, but nevertheless, this is the main hero and he or she must be satisfied. So the combat must give pleasure. And in our case, in Bloober Team, we managed to deliver great experience in our own circumstances to make it memorable, interesting, and outstanding, and in a lot of places. But yeah, making cool combat is freaking hard, and you can see different games on the market. I will not name them, but you instantly see where developers actually spend time on delivering combat, and where developers decided, okay, combat is just a small checkbox to have it on Steam page and something like this, but it's not entertaining and not engaging at all.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes with it's I don't know, in the not naming name sense. That's funny. I wouldn't say I could ideally say what games I can think of that actually like quote check that they're just doing it to check a checkbox. But I think there's an interesting dynamic where sometimes that combat is there to check a checkbox, but it's also because it's in a fantasy that goes beyond like gritty combat, where there is like a bigger tapestry of things the player is trying to do, and sussing out those compromises is interesting, right? Like, you know, in deep visceral combat games, you know, there's so much attention, and then in those other games there might be a situation where on the one hand they need combat because something about the player fantasy is, you know, they're a fighter, but on the other hand, you know, when there's a broader experience, like maybe it's also about like managing your hotel or something, because there's games like that now, you know, where you manage a hotel and go fight enemies. It's an interesting challenge everyone in the industry faces, right? Is like, okay, our game needs combat, how much can we invest in that combat while trying to fulfill this other end of the fantasy? And in your guys' case, you know, you guys have this really clear vision that you can shoot for, you know, survival horror, things have to be as tense as possible, but you know, there's such a big challenge for everyone to hit. Kind of jumping off that, Shamil, what is a good kind of tool when you're working with someone like Dennis? Like, what is helpful for you from a tools perspective that helps you do your job better? Or can you think of any examples of that when you were sort of like, I need this, and Dennis and his colleagues sort of said, you got it, bud, and delivered?
Oh, damn, I wish I had that button. Just click and everything is there, but unfortunately we're not there yet. Maybe one day Sam Altman will give us something with ChatGPT and everything will be straight away in the engine, but we're not there yet. Regarding
hopefully not, right?
Yeah, I also don't want to lose my job.
Say from my perspective.
Regarding the magic tool, like what would be the best tool in work collaboration? Of course, there are a lot of cool tools like Miro boards, for example, like Jira or like Confluence from Atlassian. But like the best tool probably was and still would be. I mean, I know that all those tools are for fixing that problem, but like still, the best tool is always just to, let's go to Discord and talk. Let's brainstorm that shit and fix it and deliver it on the best way as possible. I mean, that always wasn't, I believe, still would be the best tool from my side, of course. But
I would say that's something that worked very well on our team as well. That was something I really appreciate, that when you needed to talk to someone, then that was always possible, and you didn't have to schedule a meeting for maybe next week or so. So whenever someone from the combat design team needed something, then we were always like, of course we had those times where we needed to focus on a work, but usually it was always possible within at least, let's say, an hour or so, or maybe two, to get back and talk about a specific problem and then find a solution together or come up with a good idea.
Yeah, that's like an important production, almost like important production producers, a thing producers need to think about, right? Is like how fast can people clear roadblocks, you know, for each other, with also out demanding each other's like time too much. And it's cool that like whatever overarching, you know, way you guys were working on the game was that you could afford those opportunities instead of having to, you know, like log them in something to talk in a meeting, like you said, a week from now. Like it seems like a good way for each side to clear up, you know, like log jams that were popping up.
Yeah.
Dennis, I will sort of use myself as a poor example here, which is that, you know, like I am a humble writer. I rely on words to do my job. Everything with numbers scares me. When I am speaking with folks from the programming side of the business, it is often a challenge for me to like assemble the words I need to either understand what they're doing or ask questions about what they're doing. On your side of the table, you have to talk to, if I say the word idiot, I'm being mean to myself. So I'll just say fools like me. You have to talk to fools like me who, you know, like don't necessarily have a full understanding of what you're doing. How have you felt? You know, we sort of were just talking about communication and helping each other, like through log jams, through roadblocks. What do you think you've learned about communicating with folks on the team who aren't as deeply aware of how you work? Like, what have you sort of learned about explaining to other people, like, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do, this is what you need to do? Like, what have you sort of learned about that process?
I mean, it's a tough question because it's nothing that you learn during one project, and then like the communication between teams. I would start by saying, as long as you don't think someone else is like, I'm talking to a fool now, or to someone who's not.
Oh yeah, no.
I think when you start with that mindset, then it can never go right.
Yeah.
So the more I would say, the more time you spend with a specific person, the better you know how to communicate with one another.
Yeah.
So I think that's more like the right way to go. Like, not trying to think, like go into a conversation thinking I need to talk to a level designer now, so I'm switching to this mode where like the level designer language. So that's I think that would be the right approach, but more like getting to know the people you work with.
Yeah. And yeah, that's one of those, I mean, Bloober, you guys, Bloober's been on this like great run of like games that like maybe take a while to make, but Silent Hill 2 just came out within, the last couple of years. When I was talking to your folks at GDC, your CEO, he was sort of talking about like having, multiple teams working on release on multiple schedules, and giving people that time to work together and get to know each other seems like important, and it seems obvious, but in an industry where either turnover can be high for harmless reasons, turnover can be high because of layoffs, people bouncing between jobs to try and get better pay at different studios without having to become seniors or move into management. It's not always easy to keep time between people together, and it seems like you guys benefit from having long periods of time to learn how the other person communicates what they need. It seems like you guys really get to benefit from that. Oh wait, Shamil sort of.
I'm thinking. I'm just thinking if I understood your question correct.
I don't even know if that was a question, if I'm being honest. maybe more of a rhetorical flourish at the end of a ramble, which is something we do on this podcast. That's the technical word by rhetorical flourish.
Okay.
So I'm happy to actually put something down that has a question mark at the end of it. Shamil, we can double back towards like implementing combat in this game for a second, which is, Cronos the New Dawn also has a upgrade system and a progression system and evolvement where you can improve different elements of your combat. A long time ago, I talked to a game designer, and he sort of clued me into something I never thought about the problem in the way of, which is when you give players choice over like skill trees or what they're upgrading, you're sort of giving them an option to say like, hey, I need help with this specific thing. I feel like I'm struggling with this thing. I'm going to put points in something that makes that pain less easier. Do you feel like, as a combat designer, how do you sort of interact with, the people working on those, or not interact with the people, excuse me. How do you account for a system where the player says, all right, I'm going to ramp up my damage so now I can hit everything faster? Like, how do you sort of work within that particular constraint to make sure combat is still fun and tense, even if the player is sort of like putting all points in like obliterate, click and head explode, like sort of?
That's a really good question. I remember in a time of working on Assassin's Creed, when we were developing the enemies in the vast open areas, like the open world, we had always had the principle that you cannot rely on players, let's say, development tree. You cannot rely on players' weapon. You cannot rely on players' health, on anything, because it's impossible to predict. Player can came up from nowhere with bizarre bazooka in his hand, but the fight still must be. So that was the premise, and that was like my fundamental, let's say, approach in the design for combat. So I cannot really rely on how player will come up to. I only have a prediction, sort of a prediction for a, let's say, a general player, like who is not cool in shooting, and it's not cool in defending. So he's a sort of like a general plus minus, has a little bit of that, little bit of that. So that's my player, and I'm developing combat for that player. But at the same time, keeping in mind that, okay, some players will be more skillful in specific places, and that's cool. And for being that more skillful, Okay, he can shred the guys, no problem. But in order to shred the guys, he sacrificed with something else. Maybe he sacrificed with health. Maybe he sacrificed with amount of ammunition he has in the ammo. Maybe it's sacrificed with the accuracy. I don't know. I really don't know what would be the outcome. So here, the decision tree in majority of games, it is more a tool for the player to build, not just only to cover what you just said, to cover the elements where the player is, that's sort of bad, okay? But also just to play around and actually to build something interesting for its own sake, like to try a different build, to try a different approach, to refresh the gameplay and etc.
Yeah. Kind of pivoting again, this is a conversation about, like making interesting combat systems, making interesting enemies. Each of you, have been playing Cronos, and luckily I think some of our listeners will have it in their hands and get to be playing it by now. Which of the enemies that these creatures can evolve into is each of your favorites for some reason? Either it's your favorite to fight against, your favorite to make players fight against. Can you sort of tell me which ones really just make your heart sing, even though they're monsters?
Ooh, you want to start?
I wanted to drop it on you first.
That's fine. I actually know which mine is. I think I know that.
Tell me, Dennis.
But that would actually be maybe a disappointing answer, because it's the first one that has not been merged with anything else yet. And that would be our simplest enemy we can have, which has this unique way of approaching the player. Like, it's very fast and has this. It looks a bit odd. It's just odd looking when running to you, but also scary in a way. I really like this one. I don't want to go too much into detail because players can better find out on their own how it feels like and how it behaves in the game. But
yeah. There's also just that sense of potential, right? Like you're looking at this thing, and on the one hand, you've adapted to the behaviors you've just described, but in the back of the player's head, hopefully the horror, the survival horror is maybe they go, okay, I can knock this guy down, and a part of their brain is going like, I got to knock that guy down before it becomes a capital P problem. So that's
exactly. Also,
that's something
Also, it's easy to kill, So it's something, if you don't think about it and you just enjoy killing it without much ammunition, then you have a new corpse on the ground. And if you have 5 of those, but also 5 of the higher, more difficult enemies, then you need to think about what order do you want to kill them in.
Yeah. Anything for you? Yeah, Shamil, can you pick a favorite of your children, or are you just going to say, no, I love them all equally?
I love them all equally, but no. But my favorite type of character that appears is the tanky characters. During the previous session that was led here in Nova Huta, some of the journalists actually witnessed it, and from their perspective, when I saw it, I saw that they were terrified and frightened when it appeared, because this particular character requests from player to change tactic pretty fast, otherwise you get dumped. And specifically, it's hard to fight with this character the first time because it delivers a new mechanic on the battlefield, and if you don't understand fast how to kill it, it's gonna be your pain in the ass. So yeah, probably the tanky character.
Yeah, it's fun to you guys seem to have a decent philosophy of I think video games can be a case where you can sort of use your test. You can use your test your way into optimal scenarios, where things flow well, things are smooth. You can create challenge still. You're not just creating something mindless, but you are always trying to sort of let the player chain things together in a way that doesn't necessarily feel like there's pushback. And it feels like with this game, the philosophy is a little bit you guys are willing to sort of push the player and go, hey, no, you have to adapt. We aren't going to make everything nice and fun for you. You have to feel some stress and some frustration. That seems like a consistent stance you guys have taken, especially with these tank enemies.
Yeah, that was the direction from Wojciech and Jacek, and it's like a very big thanks to them. If they wouldn't push it from the beginning that we are aiming to, let's call it a niche type of players who likes challenges and who are interested in challenges. And during the production, during the playtest, we won't lie, we always had this big argue that this section is too hard, this enemy is too hard, this weapon is too weak, this ability is too weak or too powerful, or we need to shrink that, or we need to have ammo here, we shouldn't have ammo here. So it was always fights within like the production team during the playtest sessions and argues, but that's like the goal. That was the goal, to find the proper curve to make it challenging, but let's say possible, doable to challenge it.
Yeah.
Because at one moment, for example, I became how to say it, not a perfect person to answer this question, because I mastered all mechanics in the game so well, so I became basically a bad voice of wisdom, let's call it this way.
It's sort of like, hey, if we measure everything against how Shamil is playing and his sense of difficulty, then oops, like it's gonna be like for the nichest of the niche, like the biggest combat freaks out there. And look, like we love a combat freak, but there's only so many.
Exactly.
Yeah, Dennis, when you were playtesting the game, was it too easy, too hard? Like, were you at Shamil's level, or were you like, no, please, like?
I don't think I'm at Shamil's level. But maybe since I'm testing with and I'm playing with those enemies like all day, like I'm probably playing that game more than most players will ever do eventually. So still, when playtesting, I remember having some cases where we had some arguments about things where I was telling him like, look at this, like, that was unfair, and he was then pointing out why it wasn't, why it was just my fault. And let's say in 90% of the cases, like, looking at it closely, then I had to admit that it was me. But that's also me as a player type. I would in first instance I would blame the game. So maybe I wouldn't be the best person to to make decisions on. But I mean, there were like maybe one or two cases where we actually had to work on to improve it. But I remember it was not only me, like during the whole process of the development, there were always cases where we had to tweak it, where it felt like, hey, this wasn't fair. It's not that was not challenging. That was not possible for me to move or whatever. So we definitely had those cases, and I had those.
Yeah. What was Shamil? Do you guys remember any of those 10%? Like the 10% where he was right?
Yeah, of course. I remember that particular moment. I remember it in the chat. Yes, I remember it, and it's not only with Dennis. There were like a lot of moments like this during the production. Like I remember once on a time I had a Jira with the task in it that the attack of the character is impossible to avoid or something. I'm looking at the video and the guy is standing for like a couple of seconds and shooting to a character that about to perform an attack and doing nothing. And I was like, okay, I have to write in the comment section like, skill issue, bro. Sorry, get good.
Get good. Just have that as a drop down, like just like close ticket solution.
Yes,
get good.
Yes, and of course. Before dropping that comment, I talked to directors.
Yeah.
If I allowed to say so, they were like, "Yeah, this is definitely a skill issue. Don't touch it."
Yeah. Yeah. Something I think, and this is me opining for a moment, is like I've been surprised to find myself as I've gotten older to be more interested in sort of these like engaging with this challenging combat stuff. Like I feel like for a long time you would have had to get me to try very hard to do anything resembling like a hard mode or a like, hey, go into this extra area where there's super hard enemies if you want to get the rewards and like perfectly learn the boss fight things. Like I might have been someone to turn down the combat if it was too hard. And I don't know why, but as I've gotten older and on paper, my reflexes have gotten worse, right? Like, cause when you age, like we're talking about players who maybe love games as equally, they'll love this kind of game all their life, but in time, like their physical ability to keep up may change. I had an interesting experience where I've sort of like gone the inverse route, whereas like I've gotten older, I've sort of been like, it feels more and more satisfying to climb over those hills that you guys guys leave for me. And I don't know what takeaway there is for that, but it's just like sort of a strange phenomenon that relates to this discussion that I'm now seeding for the future combat designers or current combat designers listening to this podcast. Shamil, Dennis, something I would love to ask you guys before we leave today. On the Game Developer Podcast, we like to give folks, this is these are the conversations where we like to talk to people who don't necessarily get as much face time with players whose work and experience is so valuable, but it's, sort of the grunt work, the in the weeds of making a game. And in the spirit of celebrating people who don't always get, their time in the limelight, is there anyone on the development team you'd love to give a special shout out to who was really great to work with, who did something really cool? Like, is there anyone you think deserves a quick shout out here at the end of our podcast for their hard work?
Dennis, do you have someone in mind?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the whole AI department, Shamil Yanbukhtin, who implemented great AI architecture from scratch. And yeah, that's the thing. When you start naming one, we will have to name them all. But it's really.
Look, the reference mark I give for people is the first episode I did as the main host. I asked Mike Bithell, the wonderful Mike Bithell, like, hey, anyone you want to give a shout out to? And he's like, can I name everyone? And I was like, yeah, go for it. So I can't give everyone that same, time, but I think it's always great to sort of like, I think that's a great sensation when you're sort of like, I got to thank this one person, but no, I also have to thank this person. Like, I think it's something, it's about the medium is like what makes it so, everything's so interconnected. It's so hard to just single out one person. I totally get that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But Shamil, you're not off the hook. You got to tell me someone.
Damn, yeah, man, this is a super hard question. It's like, if you name one person, now you have to name everybody, as Dennis said, because otherwise other like colleagues will say, you bastard, you didn't name my name, so like no Christmas present for you anymore, or like no hugs during the team event or something like this. But if speaking about like the people that the work was, in my opinion, the most, again, from my perspective, like stand out, I would name Benjamin Le Mollet. I hope, Benjamin, I pronounced your surname correctly. Sorry, the guy is French, and I don't know French surnames. So Benjamin, definitely our senior combat designer and gameplay coordinator. Ivo Vidlunsky, our lead artist. The guy is a magician. I would name also Michal Blankala, our lead VFX guy. He is basically the guy who doesn't know no word. He's like a yes man. Even if he doesn't know how to do a thing, he will tell you, I need to think. Give me time or something. He like really didn't respond a single time to me with words, no, Shamil, I cannot do it. Like, let's do something else. So
he's the good kind of yes man, where like it's not yes just to make you feel better. He's like, yes, I accept that.
Yeah,
challenge.
Michal is a rock man, like a legend.
Yeah.
And probably Zuzana Chekhovska. It's our environment artist. She's like goddess, like the best environment artist I've ever met. She's like, Xena, the warrior's queen or something in terms of environment art, like best of the best. Again, this is like in my opinion. So
absolutely. Now here's what I have been wondering is because for the audio only listeners,
and the audio team, I must say as well, like audio, Philip Zheglian, the magic guy who always like telling, we're gonna try to do this. Arkady Shrykovsky, our music composer, did an amazing job. Like, damn, man, you really opened the box of Pandora. Now I need to name all people I worked with on this project.
Oh no, like I said, Mike Bithell set a precedent, and maybe I have to allow. But you know what? And I'm going to help us off rant here. You know what, listeners? What I've been wondering is if, Shamil's, in the office here. I can see it on the video. And I wonder if he's just been naming people who are in the office today so that they don't get mad at him and they're right behind him. Shamil Dennis, Shamil, I actually totally get it. I know, this question is usually I just want to thank everyone. And what I will just say to listeners is, hey, go watch when you play Cronos: The New Dawn. When you get to the end, watch all the credits and look at each one of those names, and imagine how important they were to Shamil's work, to Dennis's work, but to the whole team, right? There are no small roles in this. Every little animation, every stomp, every visual effect, the font, you guys mentioned the fonts earlier. Someone had to do that. And I think a lot of our listeners, are obviously very entrenched in that mindset. Game developers are very celebratory of each other's work. But I don't know. Sometimes you always need a reminder that that person you don't think of very much is just as essential as you are. Shamil, Dennis, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to get my hands on this game and spend more time with it. Congrats on shipping something really cool and ambitious, and frankly, something I haven't seen before. So congratulations.
Thank you, man. Thank you very much for inviting us. It was a pleasure.
Video game difficulty discourse is really different inside a game studio. By the way, Cronos: The New Dawn is out now on PC, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series XS, and Nintendo Switch 2 today. Pick it up if you want to see how the combat works for yourself. For more from us at Game Developer, be sure to visit www.gamedeveloper.com, follow us on major social platforms, and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Blue Sky at brianfrancis.me. Today's episode was Pierre Landriau, and our theme music is by Mike Meehan. Thanks for listening. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to boot up the game and go pet all of the cats.